Hi there, welcome back to week 4, part number 5 of our Parenting Today lecture series here at the University of Maryland, University College. We're going to begin this discussion by talking about managing stress. Really important topic, and one of the most important things that we could do, whether it's as a parent, a caregiver, or a teacher, is to be a great role model in terms of stress management. So when we talk about expressing emotions, younger children tend to confide in their parents, caregivers, and friends. And as children get older, girls begin to confide more in peers, whereas boys are socialized to really express their feelings less. So the most stressful events for children universally are the loss of a parent, parental fights, embarrassing situations, and school. There are some gender differences in terms of stress. Boys tend to find external situations more stressful, so girls tend to find those internal states as more stressful. So an example of that is, boys tend to be more stressed by external situations such as performing in a sporting event or in an academic setting, whereas girls really find those internal emotional states, such as experience of intense anger or intense sadness or loss as more stressful than an actual external situation. And talk about loneliness, which is obviously a big part of stress. Children begin to experience loneliness at approximately the age 5 to 6. And this can be due to a lack of friends, perhaps being shy, not having the social skills in place to be able to initiate friendships, maybe living in an area where there aren't other children their age. Another reason that children can begin to experience loneliness is when they internalize their failures and inadequacies. These behaviors tend to be self-fulfilling and exacerbating. Talk about cascading events, and one thing that we notice is that all negative behaviors have a tendency to get worse with time, which is why early identification and intervention of behavior problems is so important in early childhood. So whether that be behavior problems, poor socialization, isolation or marginalization, discrimination, anxiety or depression, poor academic performance, poor achievement, all tend to equal poor chances of success in adulthood, and all do have a tendency to get worse over time. However, on a positive note, many of these situations are amenable or treatable, with intervention. I'm going to shift our focus now and talk about discipline. Discipline, the origin of the word is from the Latin word disciplinam, for instruction. So the main goals of discipline are to help children learn to get along with others, teach a child right from wrong, allow children to learn from their mistakes, and shift control from behavior from the parent to the child. Helps build autonomy and competence that will hopefully last a lifetime. Talk about natural and logical consequences. A natural consequence are events that follow a physical act. So an example of that, if a child doesn't eat what's being served for dinner, he or she will be hungry. A logical consequence is an event that follows a social act. So for an example, if you lie, people won't trust you. Also, if you use a natural consequence, it can be too dangerous. So sometimes we have to provide logical consequences. So for example, if a child was wanting to walk, on top of a rooftop or on top of a building, we wouldn't just allow a child to continue in that physical act because they could fall off of the building, right? So we might want to put in place a logical consequence to that behavior instead of just allowing that natural consequence to take place. So it could result potentially in a situation like that in death. So a word about punishment. Unlike natural or logical consequences, punishment has no relationship to the child's behavior. For example, spanking. So it's really used to assert parental authority. Mutual problem solving is also another strategy in terms of discipline. It's used for older children, teaching children to use I messages, writing behavioral contracts, using rewards to entice appropriate behavior and not punishments. So negative consequences, they're used to decrease undesirable behaviors. It's suggested to intervene early for parents to stay calm and objective, to state the rule that was violated, and then have a mild negative consequence that devalues the activity. Most important thing is to be consistent. That inconsistency really tends to reinforce unwanted behavior, and reinforcing positive behavior. So again, really trying to catch your child doing something right. In terms of negative consequences, there are types of consequences. So ignoring the behavior is one consequence, and that's best for annoying but not harmful behaviors. So social disapproval, sometimes parents just stating their disapproval and the consequences for a behavior can be a way to really deter unwanted behavior. A timeout is best for aggressive or destructive behaviors. Having a cool down period, it provides that natural cool down period. And it is suggested that you put a child in timeout for 1 minute for each year of their age. So an example, a 2-year-old would be in a timeout for 2 minutes, a 5-year-old would be in a timeout for 5 minutes. And again, with timeouts, the number one thing is to be consistent with them if you're going to utilize them. So what doesn't work? So after a review of more than 300 studies, what doesn't work is inconsistent discipline within or between parents, harsh explosive discipline such as violence or threats, low supervision, low parental involvement, we know doesn't work, as well as inflexible and rigid discipline. So all of those things that I just mentioned have a tendency to increase aggression and rule breaking. So discipline across age groups here, from toddlers, early childhood through middle childhood. So how discipline changes. So we can see here there's different strategies that are used across the developmental lifespan, which would be spanking, yelling, withdrawing privileges, and then negotiating. So with toddlers, bad behaviors often stems from testing limits. Different studies that have been done have actually quantified that the average toddler misbehaves 3 to 5 to 20 times per hour. So recommended discipline approaches at this toddler stage, again, is a timeout, 1 minute per year of age, diverting attention away from the unwanted behavior, unwanted activity, and providing, again, that consistent and calm approach, which can be challenging, but still important to try to do. And sometimes it can be important to try to enlist the help of a partner, family member, supportive friend in doing that to help you stay a calm parent. In terms of early childhood, 90% of parents spank children under the age of 6. Children asserting autonomy and independence. So misbehavior often stems from frustration, a lack of confidence. So timeouts tend to lose effectiveness, parents saying distractions don't work. So recommended discipline approaches are to listen, don't lecture, ask questions, to give the child choices where possible and where appropriate, to ignore tantrums, and most importantly, to model good behavior. So in terms of middle childhood, only 30% parents spank children by the time they reach the end of middle childhood, which is approximately between the ages of 10 to 12 years of age. So what does work in middle childhood? Withdrawing privileges, such as withdrawing the use of the television, the computer, iPad, other type of electronic devices or video games. Using humor to diffuse situations can be highly effective. Reminding the child of personal responsibilities, and the use of psychological control or guilt is also really effective, but can be unhealthy if used in extreme or certain circumstances. So what about spanking? We do have some research here about spanking. We know that parents who spank more commonly are female, single, African American, rural, Southern, religious conservatives, lower to middle class, and parents of children with behavioral problems. So that information is coming out of us from research and data. Children who are spanked are more commonly preschoolers, boys, non-compliant, and difficult. So most parents have spanked, Now, the interesting thing is that I've taught parenting classes for the past 14 plus years, and if you ask how many people in a group setting by raising of the hands, how many parents have spanked their children, most people will deny it. But when we're conducting, which I don't recommend, I don't really ever recommend calling people out in those kinds of settings, but it is something interesting of note. But when we ask parents to hand them a pencil and a piece of paper and give them an anonymous survey, most parents will admit they have spanked their children. Spanking typically or usually occurs between the ages of 2 to 5. Most parents are angry when they spank, and most regret spanking because they do it because they think it's useful. They grew up with it. They have an authoritarian parenting style, and they feel that their child's bad behavior warrants it. So mild spanking, according to Baumrind, remember we talked about her parenting theory earlier on in the semester, Baumrind found that mild spanking increased behavioral difficulties over time. But if a parent is warm and supportive, spanking does not always lead to behavior problems. Moderate to severe spanking has increased behavioral difficulties and can have long-term negative effects. So this right here are the effects of spanking, and you can definitely take some time to look at this slide here later. Some of the effects of spanking are immediate compliance, moral internalization, aggression, delinquent behavior, mental health consequences, as well as physical abuse. So that comes to the end of our lecture series for week 4. I hope you reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns, and I hope you have a wonderful week. I look forward to connecting with you on our discussion board.